down, yelling out money, anything, ayy. Ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Ayy, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by the NMFTA. Let me ask you a question. Do you ship LTL freight? Then listen up, because the NMFC changes went live on July 19th, and they're the biggest updates in the history of freight classification. Now more than ever, accuracy matters. That's why carriers, shippers, and brokers alike are turning to Class IT Plus, the NMFTA's new digital platform for real-time NMFC data. Stop guessing, start classifying smarter, and quote freight with confidence. It's time to get your ship together because the NMFC changes are already here. Learn more at nmfcchanges.com and get started with Class IT Plus at classitplus.com. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. This is your first time tuning in. Welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I do say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I got a very special guest. I'm going to bring him up here in just a minute. But before we do that and talk about everything that happened on Blitz Week from a data perspective and what a lot of that meant, we're going to be doing our weekly segment This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DOT. We're breaking down reefer lane today, you guys. And as always, if you want your lane broken down on the show, I just need you to email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. I need a pickup city, delivery city, and trailer type. All I'm doing is helping you guys pick out the anomalies that I see. And when I go out there and actually quote my customers, what I look for to bring them the most consistent price out there. So today's lane is we're going back to Texas. Texas is a very, very popular area right now for people needing help on. And this one is Laredo, Texas to Newark, New Jersey for a reefer. Texas was an interesting area for us these last couple of weeks. Now, granted, it was within flatbed, but as we've broke this lane down, because we were in South Texas a couple weeks back, we were in McAllen breaking down another one of those lanes. And, you know, as you see here, you guys, no matter what, the first thing I always look at is miles. All right. We're at 2,000 miles. This is a great Thursday to Monday or a Friday to Monday run. But it's, what you're seeing here is the price, the spike and everything. This is a lot better than I thought it was going to be when I saw that this was the lane that we were going to be breaking down, because in this area last week in particular, I was seeing stuff up for like $15,000, $17,000 for reefers coming out of South Texas. And the fact that the average that we see right now at about 8,300, it's a little bit lighter than I thought we were going to see overall. But again, I want you guys to pay attention to the fact that these rates that we're seeing right now don't really align seasonally. This was the first kind of blitz week of tightening capacity that we've seen in quite some time. As I've said, you guys, there's 100% confidence on my part that this is going to go through Memorial Week, this week and next week. I wouldn't be surprised if we see elevated prices through the 4th of July at minimum. Now, I could be wrong with this one, but these are the conversations we need to be having with your customers. I reach out to my customers on a bi-weekly basis at minimum to let them know what's going on in the market, especially right now, because there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. There's a lot of stuff in media and social media about our industry, and they want to know, how is this going to affect our rates? How is this going to affect our capacity? Because at the end of the day, we got to move the freight here. And I'm never going to say the rate is second, but right now, more often than not, you guys, when there is a dip in capacity, specifically within South Texas, South Arizona, and on those border cities out there, you guys, due to immigration enforcement and everything else, we need to be coaching up our customers on the fact of like, hey, I know you want to ship this on a Tuesday, but I have a truck for you guys on a Wednesday. Here's the price. We need to lock that in. We have to kind of deliver that sense of urgency, because no matter what, our customers still need the trucks to pick up, right? I think we very much well established that one out there. So it's like, as you're going and pricing any of this freight, we have to be cautious, because the rate that you quote today might not get it done on Thursday, might not get it done on Friday. We've had a couple of lanes here recently where we pretty confidently quoted out some of it, and all of our margin got ate up by the day it picked up, because things are shifting that quick right now. And no matter what, my thing is service first. I will break even. I will lose a little, I'll lose money to service my customer. But it's like, we see these spikes. All right. We know what caused these spikes. We need to be having these conversations with our customers about the importance of this, and then leveraging our core carrier base to place that capacity back in their market. So if this is your lane, if you're doing Laredo to Newark right now and you got a carrier who's doing it, say whatever it is that they're locking it in for. Ask them, when are you back down in Laredo? Do you have any other trucks down in Laredo? Is there any other lane you'll go up into the Northeast? Is it just New Jersey? Will you go to Philly, Pittsburgh, Richmond, upstate New York, whatever that looks like? You got to take that capacity and lock that in and present that down there to your customers, because rates are probably going to be elevated here. Like I've said, you guys, I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts through the 4th of July. But this is how I'm personally reading what's going on right now, because it's very tough to say this lane has stabilized or it might start dipping down. I think it's way too early in the game to be speaking with that much confidence. I know there's a lot of data out there, but I think it's safe to say the way you have to work these market swings, you guys, is when you have these carriers out there that are running these lanes, lock in that capacity, find out when they're going to be back, present those prices to your customers, and then start working back channel capacity out there. But that lane, you guys, it's Laredo to Newark. I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to stay elevated, if not rise a little bit further through the 4th of July. But that is it for this week in freight, powered by my friends over at DAT for the reefers. You guys, we're going to be doing flatbeds out there. As you know, if you want that lane broken down, hit me up, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. But let's break down DOT Blitz week and what happened out there and all the data that's going on. I got my man Adam Wingfield back on the show to break everything down. Adam, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on here, man. It's good to see you again. Long time.
It is. It's been a while. And, I read all the articles that you put out about this stuff, and I've been following it specifically within Blitz Week. And when you and I were texting about that last week, it was like, dude, it's wild. It's wild what we saw out there, how it actually affected certain markets, and, kind of like what a lot of that means. So what was one of the biggest pieces of data that you saw that you were like, damn, how did we get here?
Well, one of the things that people have to remember also is that the final analysis probably won't be dropped out until the end of the year, but we got the ability to see some real-time stuff, thanks to modern technology. And, Garrett over at Search Carriers has really created a great, kind of real-time tool. But one of the things that, obviously that really stood out to me that I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised, was the amount of ELD violations, because obviously ELD was probably part of the focus. Brakes obviously was something that really stood out. We saw folks out there that had 46 and 47 inspections and had 0 out of services, where you had some folks out there that had 1 inspection and 30 out of the services. So there was a really, really wide range of inspection detail that was placed out there. But one thing that I always say, Chris, is that to me, man, one of the most wildest parts of it is that obviously that you'll have the argument where say, hey, you know what? They're always going to find something. DOT's out there to find something. But, you know, when you have an open book test that's given to you and this far in advance with that type of information that's provided to you, you wouldn't think that safety would have gotten worse. And it actually gotten worse. We had a 31% out of service rate as it comes down to it when it came down to carriers within the actual within the actual Blitz week, which is really pretty alarming. It was pretty alarming.
Yeah, it's dude. So let's talk about that for a second, because I think unfortunately right now it's very popular to talk about trucking at kind of like all across social media. It's not necessarily freight people talking about it right now, and a lot of stuff gets very convoluted and lost because these guys couldn't even tell you how many wheels are on an 18-wheeler, but they are all the subject matter experts on it. Right. When you say out of service, can you define what that actually means? Is it a fine and they're placed out for 24 hours, or is it a complete shutdown? They got to have somebody come in and recover that load.
All right. So I'm going to give you coming from an experience, from behind the wheel experience. So an out of service is basically a timeout, right? Yeah. So how long that timeout depends. It depends on how long that way station is got a police officer that's actually sitting in the box, depending on the situation. It depends on also the violation, right? If it's an hours of service violation. So if it's say, hey, you know what, you need to take a 10-hour break. So your out of service is 10 hours long. Or if it's an out of service due to a brake chamber, well, you're out of service until you have, you know, maintenance come or roadside come and replace that issue and fix that issue to where it's suitable. So that hours of service itself, the actual term, the actual timeline within that hours of service is really contingent upon those two factors. But what I mentioned in the very beginning was one of the problems that are within the out of service is like, hey, if you sit me in the scale house and say, hey, you know what, don't move for 10 hours because you have an hours of service out of service violation, man, somebody that really just wants to get to it and just going to do what they want to do, I'm just going to keep my eye on that guard shack, out on that actual shack. And as soon as that police officer rolls out, I'm rolling out right behind him 5 minutes later. It's like one of those things where it just really depends. There's no hard line enforcement when it comes down to it. Yeah.
Because I think, like, you know, again, there's that, and then everything that was going on with, you know, the non-domiciled and, you know, ELP stuff earlier this year. And, you know, everybody became a subject matter expert on that and it's like, I think when they see violations and out of service, it is a very subjective thing, kind of to your point there, right? Like it just depends on it. Like, obviously, if you get popped for a maintenance violation, you're not leaving until that roadside comes and fixes that or tows you to the nearest shop to get that done. But there are other lesser violations out there to your point, right? Like, is it actually as serious as, you know, when you hear out of service, you'd think, no, they're not running for 2 weeks. Maybe the driver's getting fined, whatever that looks like.
Well, the problem is that when you look at how it's framed up too, so even the government will come out and say, oh, we put, there's 28,000, folks out of service. Like, all right, so give them the real detail. That doesn't mean that they're permanently out of service or indefinitely out of service. 28,000 out of service is like I said, I can get literally, I remember I was placed out of service one time in my entire time that I've driven. I was put out of service. I'll never forget. I was running a load from the Northeast down into Miami, and I had to get to it, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you. I had to get it.
Yeah.
I got stopped in Virginia, and police officer looked at me like, and I was like, yeah, I know what this is about. So, I was like, okay, I got to take my 10, right? That 10 hours wasn't 10 hours, bro.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it ain't 10 hours. So all of that really is subjective, in terms of the actual person behind the wheel, which, obviously that creates bad people are going to do bad things, regardless. And they're not going to allow, they're going to find a way to let out. You're not held hostage at the way station. They don't have, they don't put, boots or wheel locks on your truck where you can't move. It's like, hey, sit right here for 10 hours or depending on the severity of violation. However, the problem is it's framed up as out of service. When it's framed up as out of service to the general public that doesn't understand what an out of service is.
Yeah.
When it's framed up in that manner, you may think that we're making progress where we're really not making the progress that you might think, because you got to look at the millions of out of services that take place throughout a year. Like, it's really not as impressive as you think it is.
Yeah. How do fleets, I know, there's a lot of people who make the argument that like, oh, DOT inspection week is pointless because they're giving you the answers to the test before, they actually apply the test out there. Why do fleets miss that though, right? Like if you know that, hey, they're monitoring ELDs and everything, why do they like as a fleet owner, and you work with fleet owners nonstop, how can they know this and then not be very in detail with their ELDs to make sure everything's up to date?
So I'll say that the way you do some things is the way you do everything. So if you're as a fleet or not, monitoring like pre-trip inspections, you're not staying on top of your maintenance. Just because you tell me like, hey, they're going to have a blitz week, it doesn't mean I'm going to be getting any better at it, because how you do some things is how you do everything. And what I find that's very, very important to understand too is that even if you go into it and you think that, okay, they're looking at these two items, they're looking at ELD and they're looking at load securement. These are the two things that they're going to focus on. Well, don't be naive to think that, hey, you're just going to get waved in just to look at those two items. They're gonna do a traditional level 1, level 2 inspection. And what they find is what they find, and what they're going to put you out of service for is what they put you out of service for. Yeah. Many times the fleets, you don't immediately get better at providing direction, at leadership, at accountability. You don't immediately get better just because you there's a date that's saying, hey, that we're going to have more enforcement. How you do some things is how you do everything. And what you're going to find is those fleets that generally have a good out of service rating and that really get it right are going to be the ones that are going to, fly through flying colors. I'm going to give you an interesting stat too. And I haven't placed this out yet, and I was going to put it out later, but I just want to, to do it for your show to give you an idea. But out of service rankings in terms of percentages are higher the less trucks that you have. So for fleets that are 1 to 6, your out of service chances of being held out of service is almost 50%. Dang. As you get larger, you go to 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 50, 50 to 100. That number gets lower and lower and lower. And you might ask why. Well, the main reason why is because obviously, number one, when you have larger fleets, they have larger budgets to spend on maintenance. They have larger budgets to spend on managements and operations, things of that nature. And as you go smaller, some of the education behind it and some of the awareness is like, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that. So what you'll find is that, and I hate to say it, but the smaller the fleet, the higher likelihood that you are going to be placed out of service when you get to a roadside inspection. It's just the facts. It's just in the data.
Yeah. Why, I know the answer to this, but I'd love to get your opinion.
Yeah.
Why do they spike as much as they do during that week for Blitz week, right? Because there's not always a drop in capacity, right? Is there a sentiment out there where it's like, hey man, I'm going to run no matter what, but if I'm going to run and I'm going to get stopped and be shut down, I better be getting paid a lot of money to be doing it.
I think there's a premium on capacity during that week. I think you're working with carriers that are saying, hey, I'm going for it. I'm going for the gusto. There's a chance that I might be put out of service or placed out of service. If a broker's tender into a smaller carrier, they need to know that the smaller that carrier is, the higher the risk it is that freight's going to get delayed during Blitz week. So that broker's got to pay a lot more money for that in terms of that. But then also there's some scarcity involved to it too as well. You just don't want to take no chances. I think there's a sentiment of scarcity when it comes down to it. That's like, hey, you know what? It's Blitz week. It's just the way it's supposed to be. Let's go ahead and shoot the numbers up this week. And then you got Memorial Day weekend that's coming right behind it. I just can't take no chances. And that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, it's, I look at it is my sentiment has always been this, Adam, the market's the market, right? Like the free market will perform the way that the free market does. There's not, and it's like, if I got people coming in and asking for more money or whatever, like it is what it is, right? I don't take offense to that. I don't get pissed off if somebody does that, but I'm also sitting here like thinking, because, again, I report on this stuff every single week, and just because the revenue's going up doesn't necessarily mean the profit's going up, and doesn't necessarily mean this is a good thing for small carriers. Now, I'm not saying higher rates is bad. Okay. That's not what I'm getting at all. But is there a sentiment out there that a lot of these rates are paper rates? Because if these guys don't get paid in a timely manner, that if you got paid 15 grand, but you got to wait 60 days and you can't pay your fuel bill in 30 days, is that a paper rate there? Right. So it's like, is there any sentiment out there in the driver community where it's just like, is this too good to be true?
Well, I mean, you're going to have that because there's, especially, you were talking about reefer rates earlier. Some of those rates, there are some bots that are posting loads on a load board that kind of like, yeah, this can't be. man, this is 15,000, 16,000. There's got to be something to it. So there's always that, I don't know about that factor when you've been beaten down for 4 years. Yeah. When you've been in a market that's been beating you up for the last, you're talking about almost 1,300, 1,400 days.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're going to have to really show me a little bit more consistency than the first 4 months of the year to make me believe what you're showing me on a load board. Mm-hmm. And then you got to think about that, and then you see the fact that, okay, you know what? There's operators, there are some operators that don't know how to calculate fuel, right? So they don't know how to calculate fuel in terms of how do I need to negotiate fuel with you at $5.60 a mile versus $3.60 a mile. There's a difference on how I have those conversations. The thing about that is that you have to really, really understand that if you don't know how to use those calculations to your advantage, you got some that think that, okay, fuel's at almost $6 a gallon. People think it's a bad thing. Well, it's a bad thing if you're not, running your FSC right. If you don't have an FSC program, or if you're not tendering FSC, because the higher the fuel is, the more you're going to get on FSC. But if you're on the spot, and that you've been running at $3.56 on average last year, and this year you're running $5.60 on spot, then that I have to book 30 more cents per mile into my rate in order to cover the fuel difference that I was booking last year, just so it to make sense. So if you don't do these things and you're not considering these things when you're going through those conversations, yeah, absolutely, it's going to look like paperweight to you.
Yeah, and then also, do you think that capacity might be negatively affected the higher that rates go? And what I mean by that is how many people are now only going to work 2 weeks out of the month because they're like, man, I fucking made everything I needed for these 2 weeks. Like I can take 2 weeks off now.
I don't think that's the case because, at the end of the day, man, there's never going to be enough, especially when it comes down to a lot of people mindset. The rates can never be high enough. They're never going to be fair enough. I don't care if you're paying $9 a mile right now. They're going to say, yeah, you should pay me $10 a mile for it. Like, or if you're getting paid $10 a mile for it, well, the broker probably made $9.50 a mile for it. There's never going to be enough when it comes down to it. That's just people in general. So I'm not talking shit about nobody, period. I'm just saying people. People are never satisfied. That's the reason why inflation is the way it is. That's the reason why it's just because people in general, we as American people are never satisfied. So no matter how high rates are, it's not going to be good enough unless the government gets involved and say, hey, we want to set a cap here or whatever, and that's a totally different story. But I just don't believe that we'll ever see equilibrium when it comes to say, okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, to your point, it was the other day. I forget who this was, but somebody stitched a video of a driver just like 6 months ago saying like, there's got to be a minimum of $3.25 a mile. That's what every load should be. And then now they put out another, there's got to be a minimum of $5.50 a mile. And then somebody stitched that. They're like, how did it change? Right. Yeah. And to your point, dude, it's just like, what is that number where, because as much like when rates are down, and rates haven't been high enough yet for I think a lot of people to actually accept like, hey, this is the way things are going to be moving forward. But it's like the second that people sit here and say we need a cap or a minimum, you don't want that at all. The last thing you want is the government coming in and saying, Adam, you cannot make anything more than $2.75 a mile on all your miles moving forward. That is it. And that's the last thing people want. They think they do in the moment when they're making $2.25 on a load or whatever that is. But the second somebody comes in and caps what you can make on a shipment or in your business, dude, I think that would have more of a negative effect on every industry than most people can even conceptualize. Because the day somebody comes to me, Adam, and says, you can only make X moving forward, I'm done. I'm folding everything up. Fuck you, I'm out. Like you cannot cap me in any capacity on what I can and cannot do in my business.
I think that, I just had a conversation with Stephen Rui, and we were talking about pre-deregulation during that time period where there was that, there was the government involved in transparency caps, things of that nature. But what people didn't realize that during that time frame too is that the actual operating companies, the motor carriers, had to submit accounting, financial reports. They had to have all that stuff together in order for the rate mins and things to be set. So there's going to be that involvement to where when you ask the government to get involved, they're going to get involved, but they're not going to get involved from a 30,000 foot level. They're going to want your data. They're going to want to have access to this, to have access to that, because they want to see everything across the free world. And at that point, it's going to make it to where like, wait a minute, is this even worth it? Is it even worth what we're asking for? And from an advocacy perspective, I'm the type of person, I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm not going to sit here and, I've sat in the driver's seat. I've seen both sides of the table, and I understand the business from both sides, but I'm also going to be as neutral as approach so you can see both sides of the argument as well. Of course, I'm absolutely for drivers and carriers, number one, most importantly, but I don't want to have the drivers and carriers to be led to the barn with blind spots and not see what's happening. And the thing that that concerns me most about those things is that, when we're constantly seeking that high, it's just like a pendulum, man. Like if you realize that we're coming out of COVID, which was one of the worst time periods and the best at the same time, because it was a pendulum that swung in the same direction with the same velocity. Well, when rates hit this high, I want you to realize that at some point, because we're talking about an equilibrium type market, it's going to swing back in the same direction. And when it swings back in that same direction, it's science. It's going to have the same force.
What are your thoughts on this? I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if this spike in rates is going to last as long as some are hoping, because how many company drivers are now going for their owner operator dream and they're going to flood the market with capacity again. And it's because like when you go from, I think it's almost like the reverse COVID effect here, Adam, because when it was like low and then it spiked up really, really high and then everybody dumped in and then capacity flushed into the market. I almost think now people are like, dude, why would I work for, 40 cents? I'm just making up a number, 40 cents a mile here as a company driver when I could go out and make $8,000 on that load myself. I only need one of that. And then all my overhead's covered for the month. Do you think that is going to see a rise in new entrants? And you report on this often. So that's why I'm asking you, how many new authorities do you expect to be granted here in the next 60 or 90 days?
So in the last 30 days, we had 6,000 new authorities granted, which was a 19% decrease in terms of just period over period. So it wasn't like authorities are getting granted at a higher rate. However, it's going to take time. I don't believe that they're going to see rates on the load board today at, you talked about loads that you were seeing at 8, 9, 10,000. They're not going to see those things and be like, okay, let me go get my DOT number tomorrow. I don't think that's going to be the case, because they've been out of in a lull. Market's been terrible for so long that it's going to take a little bit more. You're going to have to impress me a little bit longer. You're going to have to show me that if I go out here and go buy a truck, that this is not something that's just going to happen overnight. So I don't think that we're going to see the $12,000 and $13,000 months. I mean, 13,000 authority months that we were adding back during the COVID period. We're still seeing a 6,000 enter. I think more importantly, we're going to have a slower exit, because you're going to have people hold on like, wait a minute, things are starting to turn around. Things are starting to get a little bit better now. If it wasn't for diesel fuel, whatever that may look like, we may have a slower exit. I think the really, really big challenge is going to be the SCOTUS ruling is going to have impact on whether or not that capacity is even valuable or not. And what I mean by that is that if I start a new authority today and I'm chasing spot market freight, and I'm wanting to establish myself, will you as a broker take a chance on me? Well, if you don't, is there another broker that's not going to take a chance on me because I'm new? Is there another broker not going to? So is it going to be to the point where I'm going to be struggling to find freight, and I'm going to be the guy that's on the outside of the playground that can't play because I'm too new?
I'm going to take it back a step further. How many banks are not going to be willing to finance new authorities here to buy equipment due to the fact that how many people out there are backed up on, they might be 3 months behind on payments and stuff like that. So are banks and financial institutions and lenders going to look at this and be like, dude, you're too high of a risk. We're not going to issue you a loan unless you can put 50% down, or, our arbitrary examples here. But like, I think that's more of a concern than is a broker going to work with you. Is it's going to be like, do you have the finances in the credit to even get qualified? Because dude, when we saw the massive spikes in equipment and everything else, how much iron is sitting on lots now that were repossessed and everything else? And it's just, banks are going to look at it as it's just too high risk of a loan potentially.
No, I agree. And then if you notice that when you go to buy a truck and you go to a lender, or you go to a dealership and you buy a truck on a dealership, one of the main questions they're going to ask you is how you're going to get your freight. Where's that freight going to come from? So, as a bank, if I'm looking at this as proactively as possible, if I'm a bank and I'm looking at this as proactively, and Chris gets started with a brand new authority, and I'm going to loan him a note on a $70,000 truck, but then I'm like, wait a minute, you're a new authority. Like, how are you going to get freight? And you're going to say, oh, well, I'm going to, obviously I'm going to haul general freight. I'm going to get on DAT. I'm going to get a truck stop. That's how I'm going to do. Well, as a bank, I want to verify that because I want to make sure that I'm not taking a risk on you to where I'm going to have to go back and get that asset a year later because you're not able to keep up with the payments. That's going to be one of the concerns when it comes down to it. But then the problem is as this capacity exits, you're going to have dealerships and auctions flooded with inventory, which is going to lower the price of this equipment that's going to be placed on the yards. So at that point, it's kind of like, hey, what are we doing? Like it's going to be a very, very difficult time period, I believe, in terms of the muddling of the water, and because liability is going to be like, hey, I don't want to loan you the note on this truck because it might come back, and the broker's like, well, I don't want to give you the freight because I might get sued for it.
Yeah. It's dude, it's going to be interesting. You got a couple minutes to go a little extra here, Adam, or you got to jump?
Yeah, come on with it.
Yeah. So a lot of what I've been breaking down about this ruling on, from the Supreme Court last week, and I'm not going to make a fucking drawn out post on LinkedIn about this like every other legal scholar has. I'm being sarcastic. They're not legal scholars. They're just using that. But I look at a lot of this as, okay, I'm more. And I was talking about this pre-lead up to it when I had an attorney on my show a couple of weeks back. He'll be coming back on here in a few more weeks to break down kind of the posting. But my main concern, the thing that I'm paying more attention to is the next lawsuit that comes up, the next big one where a broker can prove they didn't do any of that stuff. And are they still going to be held liable? Like what is actually going to, because like no matter what, it is what can the attorneys prove here in court, right? It doesn't matter what the Supreme Court said. Ultimately, it's what can your attorneys prove or, defend in that moment. My big concern for fleets out there, smaller fleets, owner operators is now what came down. Brokers are not going to work with carriers unless you've been in business for, I'm making this up here, but I'm saying, is it a year? What is that number that shows? Is it a year? And then furthermore, shippers, anybody who is getting direct freight, are shippers now going to look at you and be like, the juice ain't worth the squeeze going direct. I would rather put all the liability on a broker, because now shippers carrier selection process is 100% going to be in the spotlight, because if they go direct to a carrier and they selected that carrier according to the Supreme Court's ruling, that shipper can now be sued if that driver gets in any trouble out there. So how is this going to shake up the dynamic of it? And what will this ultimately lead to? I think it's too early in the process to come up with any confident decision on that. But I do unfortunately predict that the smaller fleets will be disproportionately affected by this ruling at a higher level than any of them are even comprehending right now, because the risk just became massive to brokers and shippers on who they're going to actually load with their product.
And the thing is that shit rolls downhill, and that's how I kind of see things, right? So I made a post about this, when that ruling came out, because I have the same sentiments. I share the exact same sentiments. I truly believe that small carriers are going to be disproportionately affected by this more than anybody else, and for any other reason than the fact of, and I want to take the meaning behind the ruling out, right? It's a safety ruling. It needs to happen. But from a selection process and knowing how brokers think and being in rooms with brokers and being in the rooms with shippers and understanding how they feel in terms of taking on that liability, Chris, why in the hell would I even want to work with you if you got a conditional safety rating? It doesn't make sense. Like, I've got so many other carriers to choose from. Why would I want to work with you with Mr. One Truck that just got 3 months of authority when I have other options out there and I can just use those other options? Because my goal is to lower my liability as much as possible. I want to make sure that the people that I work with and the people that I do business with, we're able to go to bat and I can trust you. I know that you're going to take care of the customer's freight. I know that you're running safe. I know that you're doing the things that you need to do on the driver's side. And it has nothing to do with national, none of that stuff. Like none of that matters, right? I'm safety first, safety more importantly, because at the end of the day, when you look at it at the big scope of things, ultimately the biggest goal for the ruling is to say, hey, you know what? If you're a broker, you're going to be accountable for who you partner with, because the people that you've been partnering with lately have not been the right partners. They've been causing accidents. And that's kind of what the SCOTUS saw in that particular ruling with C.H. Robinson. C.H. Robinson works with small carriers. C.H. Robinson is one of the largest brokers, if not the largest broker in North America, right? What if C.H. Robinson starts squeezing and say, you know what? We can't do this anymore. then guess what? All right, a small carrier. Okay, well, you know what? And I just get started. I won't be able to work with C.H. Robinson. So if I've got 5 brokers that I used to be able to work with, I'm just giving a number. If I got 5 brokers that I used to be able to work with when I get started, and I only got 4. Well, guess what happens when the TQL says, yeah, me too. And I only got 3. But then what happens when ABC says, yeah, now I only got 2 options. And all of a sudden, hey, why are you not loading my truck? And I saw the same exact shit happen when brokers started clamping down on inspections.
Yep.
They say, you know what? I can't tender freight to you unless you have at least 1 inspection.
Correct.
And you remember that, right?
Oh,
it was a squeeze.
Yeah.
It was a squeeze. And it wasn't even SCOTUS.
Yeah.
It was just like, hey, I'm just covering my ass as much as possible. But it wasn't one of those things where, you know what, you can be financially held liable. And then the limits of those liability in terms of what that cash value of that liability, you don't know.
Yep.
So this is why I say small carriers are going to be disproportionately affected by that, because at that point, you look at it. I gave you the stats. You think about that. As a smaller carrier, you're much more likely to be held out of service in a roadside inspection as your numbers get smaller and smaller. And that is the reason why I'm screaming from the top of the hill in support of small carriers. I don't want you to be blindsided. I don't want you to have blind spots, but do not think that this is not going to impact you, because it will have impacts. What those impacts may look like, sure, we don't know, because none of us know. It's going to take, like you said, it's going to take another unfortunate incident where it's going to be liability that's going to actually be litigated to really kind of just break that apart.
Yeah, I truly think the next ruling is going to be more important than this last one.
Absolutely. That's a precedent setting.
That set. Yeah, you're right. That set the precedent. But now it's going to be, and this is my big concern out there for a lot of brokers. It's because if you go as far as, you know what, I used the right carrier onboarding, they didn't have any out of service. There was nothing out there that was public that said they were anything. I documented everything properly. I followed my SOPs. My lawyer signed off on this SOP. And if a broker is still found liable at that point, that's when I think the game fundamentally changes. And I think I don't want to go as far as saying that's when you're going to see an exodus of brokers, but I think it is going to definitely change that will change the industry more than this last ruling, because all that essential, like, and if you guys want, so like Brian Nelson, he's the attorney who's been on my show a couple of times here lately, and he's going to be coming back on here in a couple of weeks. He actually just put out a really, really good post about this morning in regards to a Home Depot truck with Warner Enterprises, a lawsuit in the state of Texas that just came. Like, I would highly advise everybody read that in particular. But I think that's going to be the thing, right? Like, I think everybody can agree we want safer roads, safety first and everything. But what is that line that, hey, the broker adequately covered all their bases here and unfortunately still something happened? That line hasn't been set yet, unfortunately. I think it's actually more muddy now than it is in any other thing, right? Because it's like, I don't know, man. There's a lot to be seen. I think that I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm in massive support. I'm not in support of this at all, because I think it causes more chaos for what, like, it seems like you and I are aligned on it, for the smaller fleets. And if the largest brokers out there are now going to be like, yeah, dude, I know we used to work with you after 30 days. We can't touch you until you've been in business for a year. And if you're looking at the overall market share that some of these larger providers actually control, I'm not saying that drivers won't be able to find a broker who will work with them, but do they have the financial runway in place to pay all their bills while they're waiting?
I saw something interesting. Pam Polinack, she actually posted that she received whether it was a communication or something, where another broker was asking for the last 30 days of drug test results for a particular carrier in order to do business with them. So here's the thing, like, there's so much cloud that's hovering around this that you don't know at what level, because as an attorney, I'm going to eat up your vetting processes regardless. You're going to say your system, well, I'm going to eat your system alive. I'm going to dig so deep into that system that you're using and the subjectivity of the system you're using. And then eventually you're going to have these vetting companies that's going to be sequestered in these type of litigations. There's going to be so much mud in that water because it's always going to be like, hey, I'm going to get to the bottom and I'm going to prove that you as a broker didn't do all of your due diligence. And you as a broker will not know what that bottom line of due diligence is. Even if you say, hey, I've done everything that I can possibly do, there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more that you could have done. Just like as a driver, there's always more money that I could make on a load. So there's subjectivity is going to take place. And I think that that's going to be a precedent that's going to be set from the very first ruling that's coming after SCOTUS. So that very first case that gets litigated, becomes public, that's going to set a different precedence, because then it's going to say, you know what, that's going to remind you of the what was that, McDonald's and the hot coffee spill back in.
Oh yeah.
So that gives me that McDonald's coffee spill feel, like, hey, you know that it's hot, but you burned yourself and I'm still getting held accountable for it, because that's going to be that first example that's set after that ruling. And once that tone is set, then the C.H. Robinsons of the world and the big 3PLs of the world, you're going to just start saying, hey, you know what, I just can't do work with you. Then you got the megaphone that's coming down and saying, hey, well, we don't need to work with brokers anyway. You can go direct to shippers. Well, if you know how that process works, and if you've ever went directly to a shipper before, had conversations, you've got a shipper that throws out RFP, like, you don't, that's not a common fix to the problem. It's not a common solution, because in some cases it's not realistic. So I think that what needs to happen is, I think really the what happens on the very next case, which there's going to be many. I think that I was talking to Stephen the other day. There are tow trucks that are actually leveraging this case because they're not getting paid. And they say, well, if we're going to blame the broker didn't vet the carrier and I didn't get paid on my tow bill. There's going to be so many different ways of accountability that's going to be placed. That brokers just are going to just say, hey, you know what, we're going to go a different direction on the carriers that we choose to work with. And unfortunately, smaller carriers are the ones that are disproportionately ones affected.
Yeah, I think now there's probably, and again, this is why I'm waiting for lawyers. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of lawsuits that are going to be coming down from a lot of this stuff. I look at it now as how many carriers, how many fleets are now going back to the shippers who, like, they're going through all those contracts where a shipper essentially absolves themselves from any responsibility, because those exist out there, right? Like, how many of those are going there? They're going back to the table and be like, we're not signing this. You got to remove that. You know? And I think people are focusing in. I'm not saying they're focusing in on the wrong things. I just think they're only looking at it from like a 10% lens on what the trickle down effect could ultimately lead to. And I'm trying to. My secret shipper audience who listens to the show, who DMs me and emails me, you guys are always going to stay 100% anonymous here, but I would love to see how many of them are now looking at, are we done going direct to a carrier? Are we going to leverage the broker liability and let them take on all the risk now?
It's going to be.
Yeah, man, Adam, we could go on here, dude, but I know you got to get going. But dude, how does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on?
Yeah, you should see me on here on LinkedIn, at Adam L. Wingfield on Instagram. I'm very, very active on Instagram. I'm active a little bit on X, so you can find me at Adam L. Wingfield on X as well. But that's the best way to get in contact with me, man. Obviously I'm a big fan of what you do, Chris, and I love the fact that you're still doing it, man. So I love the consistency. No,
absolutely, dude. We have to, right? Like, we need more actual operators talking about this, because with today's environment with on social media, there's a lot of influencers that are, more like political pundits that are now talking about freight. And it's some of the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my fucking life.
I agree.
People eat that up. So it's like, as an industry, we have to control the narrative from operators, right? Like, we have to control that narrative and squash any of the bullshit. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I got a guest coming on tomorrow. You guys know what to do. If you guys got value, subscribe, share, get this message out there. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag. Hey.